Well, that was a really exciting clip. And here, I almost thought that James and I sound like broken records because we've been saying the same thing for a long time. But if you think about the definition, a broken record wouldn't play the same message. It doesn't play a message anymore at all. And he and I and James Corbett, amazingly consistent, at least I could say that about my colleagues. I won't say it about myself, but over the years, the consistency and quality and care and the the wording of giving life through breath to these concepts of freedom. James Evan Pilato, welcome to Grand Theft World Podcast. How you doing tonight?
Doing great, man. Thanks so much. Been a while. I think it's been like 5 or 6 years since we talked.
Sorry to make you sit through a clip of yourself in the past, but I thought it would be good and apropos for this conversation because, like, Bezos is the new Ellison. Like, things have changed, but there's still a lot that's very much the same. Like, records.
And I learned that. Would we have even known who Elon Musk was back then?
No, and there was no Bitcoin back then because I was like, we can make a new currency that's independent of the Federal Reserve.
Well, that's true. We were a few years away. Well, but one of the last things you said, unless you make your own media company.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's take you back in time to your days spinning records at college radio. Were you a music lover before college? How did that all begin? And because it's part of your passion and that drives your consistency. So I'm hoping to help the audience understand some of the multitude of layers that make up James Evan Pilato. And let's go back to the earlier layers of music.
Oh, I've always been into music since a little kid, and all of it's filled with this sort of Christian upbringing. But mom and dad were in the choir, and dad was the choir director, so there was still that musical element. And there was sometimes music in the car, and it's not like we didn't have television. So there was always music kind of there. And the older I got, the more I got into kind of, because I wasn't allowed to have it, I was trying to grab a hold of it. And that's the thing, I think. It was because music and media and all that stuff was kept away from me. My parents had become born-again Christians in the early 70s. And I got one older sibling. But we both grew up totally sort of growing up in the Baptist church in the Satanic Panic 80s. And it was Garbage Pail Kids and backwards records and Russians gonna bomb us. It was all of that stuff. So it was this weird, you're supposed to stay away from it, which of course makes you only want to get into it more. Other friends that I was able to hang out with, stay the night with, that were friends from public school and Christian school. I did that for a little bit. But that cost money. So I mostly still went to public school my whole run. But there were other kids I was friends with who it wasn't as strict that way.
They could listen to Kiss instead of Stryper.
They could listen to both of them. And you nail it exactly. Because one of my buddies, Joey, he had Stryper. And that was sort of the stuff, you could push that more to your parents of like, oh, look, see, it's Christian. It's okay. Meanwhile, yeah, Kiss, Def Leppard, all the hair metal stuff.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the hairspray involved, even with Stryper, or, that it was a whole genre, kids, that men used Alberto VO5 quite a bit.
I finally in Portland at some point, it was probably 2017. And yeah, I've moved from Portland, Oregon to Santa Fe, New Mexico since we've talked last. I saw Def Leppard, Poison, and Tesla. Because I was like,
wow, that's awesome.
12-year-old, 13-year-old me would really want to be able to do this, but couldn't. So yeah, I went as just a handful of years ago.
You got to be sure to catch Twisted Sister too, then, and Quiet Riot when they're on tour.
Twisted Sister. They came through my way.
Motley Crue. Who else? Iron Maiden. Look at all those
20.
shows.
Iron Maiden, man. That was. I used to love that as a kid. Yeah.
To bring us to the crazy super present, I think Dee Snider has basically said, those anti-maskers can't use "we're not going to take it, hell with them," but people for Ukraine can use "we're not going to take it," and he's
There should be
okay
that
with
meme
that.
where it's
But
like,
not the
no, but
Palestinians.
yeah, the guy in the jacket, the no and yeah, like no on mask.
It's
Yeah,
funny
for
how the
Ukraine.
values change as they get older,
D.
Just
Snyder.
So then there was some point where basically Dad stops going to church, and it wasn't necessarily I reject religion. I think he was just sick of going to that church. But then he started to go to see movies and started to buy more tapes for the car. And that just, of course, made it worse. And then it wasn't long before I was allowed to go to the movies and get tapes with parental advisory, of course.
Were you in the AV club in high school?
What counted as the AV club in high school was super small. I graduated with like 88, 90 people, I think. So it was not a huge school. Which I was thinking while we were listening to that clip. Very recently, my hometown in southern West Virginia, they've declared the New River Gorge Bridge. It's a big whitewater rafting, base jumping, outdoors place, and it has been for a long time. They've made it a national park now.
Do they have like Deliverance play while you drive over the bridge? Because that's new.
That's Georgia.
But that's New River Gorge where they filmed it, I thought.
I don't think so.
I thought that's where they show, like in the movie, I thought they show that area, but they filmed it someplace else. But I thought New River Gorge and that bridge were in that movie.
I don't think so.
I'm not an expert on Deliverance, and I'm not looking to be. So,
being a West Virginian, I've become somewhat of an expert on this. Deliverance is from '73. I think it's set and shot in Georgia. The bridge in my hometown opened in '77.
Okay,
pretty
good.
Much a couple months after I did.
But I think that gorge is used, not necessarily the bridge, but that area where the rafting maybe was shot there. And I'm not an expert on this because I only, I don't watch Burt Reynolds
look this up.
before Bandit. I don't really like Burt Reynolds before Bandit.
But in thinking about education, the other thing that's happened recently in my town, the schools that I went to as a kiddo, they've since consolidated in the county a couple of years ago. They've sat unused. Now developers are going to turn them into deluxe condos and modern apartments. So literally the places where I don't know if this is a positive or a negative. The places where I was given an education have been turned into, luxury. There'll be Hiltons and who knows what.
If you look at it this way, it's the prisons for kids are later turned into condos for adults. And I've seen that in my town too. Right. Okay. So, and they also take and build these very nice nursing homes because they get a tax rebate. And then after a certain period of time, they stop using it as that. They have another facility, then they turn that into condos. And it's like there's a gimmick to it. So the prisons for old people and young people get turned into condos for people in the middle. All right. So AV club, minimal. And then you go to college and is there college radio? Like how is it like? Yeah.
That's mostly why I that was one of the big reasons I went. It
wasn't because a guidance counselor said, look, you keep getting sent to the principal's office because you won't stop talking about this stuff. Maybe you should just have a show. I didn't know if it started there like that or if it was like more innocent.
I did the morning announcements in high school.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's high pressure, dude. If you do those wrong, people make fun of you. They'll find you. Hey, I heard you messed up. The whole school heard you messed up this morning. So like, tell me how that went. Like, how did you think you could do that as opposed to the kids who listen to the announcements?
Because I've always loved to talk. I've always had a bunch of stuff I want to share. So whether it was, and of course, then it wasn't like I could get on there and talk about records. But I probably had my, rock band shirt on. There was Channel One. When
did you like they wrote the script for you? Were you allowed to make it edgy?
No. Well, I mean, we were able to goof off some.
Okay.
And that's more of what we were probably what we were into. I was always more into being disruptive. This was probably like, hey, we can put his
disruptive to use.
And I was the class clown, voted class clown in the yearbook and shit. But college had a radio station. So this was 94, 95. Right, pretty much as the bottom fell out of alternative. And the funny thing ended up being, I didn't fully realize this at the time. I was also super pushy, and I knew I was going to do stuff at the station anyway. This is in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. The station still exists. It had been around for a while. 89.7. Not a bunch of people wanted to. It was almost like once Kurt was dead, and alternative had splintered off into all sorts of things and corporatized, fully corporatized and done.
Before everything turned Nickelback.
Yeah, and then it's really 96 Telecommunications Act 90. Like that's you get the death of blues and the incoming
Kurt shooting himself like Gary Webb, and then
the
Communications Act. Those two things pretty crimping that whole schedule there.
Pretty much.
So you train for a little while, and you have to do the stuff that they want you to do, and then you can get a specialty show.
Yeah.
And my first specialty show, I think, was playing records with my buddy, who I still am great friends with, who I don't know if you've ever heard me say these words. He's essentially become a sort of character on my morning show. Alexa friend. I have a guy I just refer to as Alexa friend, so I don't ever, I've never said his name on the air, but we are real, true life friends, buddies in college. And we did a show called On the Record and played vinyl, which in 96 or 97 or whenever it was something. And it actually, it took a little bit of work to be able to have stuff to play.
Did people keep calling in to tell you to clean your CD player at the station? Because they're like, we hear this hiss. There's this hiss with the recording. It's not all ones and zeros. What's going on over there? All right, so that's pretty edgy because, the hipsters didn't get into vinyl for another 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So it's a huge craze now. Yeah.
Did the university have like a record collection from which you could choose?
They had a small amount of stuff that was mostly the newest punk singles that had been sent into the radio station.
Oh, right on. So it wasn't like Barry Manilow collection or, like Kenny G or something like that. They actually had some punk records.
They had some of that, and we basically started to hit, the used stores, the used bookstores. Wonder Book and Video is a East Coast chain, I think. So we would go looking for, and of course then, kind of unlike now, you could go buy them by the pound because there was not a giant demand for them. They were in some corner at the place that was selling, like, we've got all the compact discs and things.
Yeah.
But seeing those punk records get sent to the radio station, that was always part of I was always fascinated with essentially the whole music biz, how record labels worked, radio stations, and I read what magazines I could get in West Virginia in the 90s, which was mostly Spin and Rolling Stone, and then Alternative Press and Ray Gun and a few other things. That like 120 minutes on MTV.
Yeah, with Kurt Loder.
Well,
no,
the 120 minutes was the Sunday night alternative video
but
show. Kurt Loder was the news guy.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Good job. Keep me straight on MTV. Fact check me, please.
This Media Monarchy guy. He knows his Poison and Kurt Loder.
Hey, I put my time in with MTV back
like Sunday night on.
Headbangers Ball, sure.
I think it was Saturday night.
Let me just take you both back. There was a time before MTV, and you had to wait till Friday night videos. See, that's a thing. You could look it up on YouTube later.
I was a fan of Night Tracks. Was another
Night Tracks, video
show. But in some ways, I mean, what loops all this together is, unless you make your own media company, And that was the thing I basically wanted to do, I think, whether I fully realized it or not. Media, for better or worse, was this like unstoppable force. And if you got in it, it's like, oh, that could be living. You could nearly do whatever. It seemed like this world where you could do whatever you want, whether that's the highest of glitzy $1 million or, hey, I made this thing, we made a label, we made a zine or whatever, but we run it ourselves, and it becomes what have you.
Well, and it's like the height of power for a music lover back then, because to like today, you could dial up anything at any time and listen to it. But back then, you were kind of like, unless you own the album, and albums were only available so many places, and if it was out of stock or out of print or whatever, so like the ultimate control was work at a radio station, develop that radio voice, and get to play anything you want for your show and get paid for it to listen to music. It was crazy. There's like dig and ditch 101, or you can play records and get paid. Yeah, good job.
I actually was super pissed once I realized at college, because I was put on because you're told to.
You got to go to college, James. How are you going to make something of yourself in the world unless you go to college?
Well, I'm using my degree in communications and stuff. Alexa friend not using his degree.
I am managing businesses, but no thanks to my business management degree. I'll put it that way.
I was super pissed when I got to college after having been on the academic track in high school, something, whatever they call that, where you take you're going to be white collar. Yeah, and I get to college because, of course, Votech, that's for the poor kids.
He said it, I didn't, but that's the concept back then.
That was,
now,
absolutely.
Like, I'm telling my nephew, I'm like, you better get technical skills, because all this other stuff they're doing at university, I'm like, just go figure out HVAC or something like that, because that's going to be an increased need. Technical skills around inept people become invaluable, irreplaceable.
Man, and this is in West Virginia, where there's already another sort of class system where the Votech kids are the poor kids. We all come to the one school together, but then they get on a bus and go to that other place and learn, redneck shit. I get to college and realize I could have learned how to build and solder and put together and know how a radio board works, and not just how to run my stupid mouth through it.
Yeah.
I felt so sort of, all these steps along the way of like going, hey, I think I was, if not out and out lied to, I think I was misled in ways.
Maybe purposely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they used to have like auto shop where you'd like build a car engine and have like practical skills at all that stuff. And I grew up in the woods and we were redneck. So I was more about like, upward mobility and white collar job, and, go work for some big corporate, the people that left town and got some big job at like Goldman Sachs. It's like everyone in town talks about them. Oh, did you hear about so-and-so? He's working on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs. So like being around shallow-ish people, like who think like that, right? The same ones who think that the poor kids go to Votech instead of the smart kids, who want a different path in life and to have like hands-on skills and, that consistency of maybe they just work better with their hands. Right.
When that dawned on me, of course, the darker side of it is this, I hope those dudes gouge those people that were acted that way. Like basically, the Votech kids I went to school with that I know probably have trades and skills and might be a mechanic or a repairman. Like, I hope they gouge the people that, that sort of treated them like that in school. I was going to say, you and my brother were in Manhattan on 9/11. Because my brother, sort of in the same way, wanted to get out, wanted to go to the city.
Right. We go after the city, make our fortune. We, I was from Western Pennsylvania, you're from West Virginia, not too far apart in the upbringing. And then, I'm sure a lot of us found ourselves
from South Central PA. All my friends, different generation, but they all did the same thing.
Tony just loves saying South Central.
South Central
makes
PA.
Him sound like thuggish.
Yeah, it is South Central. I traded
York in the house.
So get to college, take over the radio station, become the music director, so that I'm the liaison to the labels and the promotional places that send you records and are calling and emailing you and wondering, did you get the CD? Did you get the record? Are you playing the record? Do you want to?
All right. So why aren't you doing the grunt work? How'd you get to be director? People need to know, like, why, what did you have to do competence wise, attention wise, organization wise, communication wise to get someone to give you a director position at a radio station?
So I did I went to school, but stayed for the town. I basically did 3 years at college, full time on campus. Was arrested, and actually talking to a producer earlier of Grand Theft World, I learned they were arrested leaving the 930 Club at some point in the past as well. I got arrested after a Sonic Youth show.
I have been to the 930 Club many times, and I have never been arrested for leaving the 930 Club.
I guess it wasn't the for leaving part. It's the after you left and
you were lingering, you were loitering or something. Those cops are all nice down there.
Got arrested, took a semester off of school because and that semester's grades had been bad. I think it's, it was somewhat a coincidence it's not as though all the bad grades led to this arrest. All those things happened. Took a semester off of school, moved off campus, and actually my parents sort of the agreement with, I think my brother had the same. As long as you're full-time and on campus, we'll help with tuition and all that. Because, of course, room and board is the most expensive part of all that, you learn. But once you move off campus, you're on your own. So there at least was here's your last.
Yeah.
But once you leave this spot, we're not paying.
You're going to be full-time adulting. Good luck.
And then that became that moment, and moved into a house that my brother had. He was in that college town. There wasn't a whole lot of other schools that I thought about. It made it easier, of course, that my brother had been at the college too. Following him there, I don't think I would say, because again, it wasn't like there was tons of other choices as far as in our budget. I certainly wasn't having scholarships rained down on me for being class clown. I'm going to start that.
You should have, man. Where's the comedy university? Who's teaching this stuff?
We're going to need that even more because all of comedy has died. I was pretty focused and excited about being at a college radio station. And every day there was, records in the mail, CDs or tapes or whatever, media. Was able to go to shows. Even that had to go to DC, so it was hard.
Yeah, you got me all distracted with the 930 Club. Now I'm thinking of Ben's Chili Bowl and all the good food that's around that part of DC.
You would.
It's 20 years ago, man. All of a sudden my stomach's like, oh yeah, Ben's Chili Bowl. Yeah, anyway.
I think my last 930 Club show was Saul Williams in 2005.
Oh wow, it's been longer for me. I saw I'll say Gomez. I can't remember the other bands I saw there, but I remember Gomez. And there was a chick who plays guitar. There was one of those bands.
Chick who plays guitar.
Liz Fair, maybe? Liz Fair. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. DC. That was a long time ago.
I was pretty focused on I initially wanted to go to film school. Through high school, I got into movies and music a ton. And those were both fairly equal and would have loved to have gone to film school. But again, it's like, we don't have that money. No scholarships are raining down on me. This school was affordable. It had a college radio station. It did also have and it is still a reputable theater department. And that's what I ended up making my minor. So I was like, okay, they don't have film, but theater that's pretty close. I had a show every semester. So that was the main first step. How did I get those steps to become music director? you basically have a show every semester, and you appear for that, and it was like a mini job. You've learned how to fill out the log and read the VU meters and take the readings on the transmitter and all that sort of stuff. So you did that, and you filled all that out, and you showed up for your shows, and you did the job. Early on, you're basically you're going to have to play from this box of stuff. It was the heavy rotation. It was the newest stuff. Long story short, at some point, the school was getting rid of tons of stuff, and they were all getting rid. And me and another guy took all the records that the radio station was going to throw out. They were putting in an elevator. So it was literally, you're losing this office, so move all this crap.
Store it off-site.
It's crazy.
So I had a show from fall 95 every semester that I was in that town. As soon as we were doing on the record. That was not long until I got into electronic music and started to do weird mix shows and playing multimedia, having 2 records and the satellite feed, and because the radio station still had a reel-to-reel machine. Not that we use that much, but it still had older pieces of technology that were all, still wired into the board, so you could play around a lot. And it was
you could find somebody's reel-to-reel, like bootleg recording of Jimi Hendrix or something, and bring it in the studio and play
for
it.
Sure.
Because you know how to spool that up. Good job.
So that kind of became maybe the playground, I think, probably where Media Monarchy grows from, because it was starting to mix together maybe disparate things. And it was doing a show that I was already kind of doing. I called it Skinny. That could have been a whole other like DJ Skinny. Maybe it could have been a whole other life. Had 9/11 not happened, and I got a computer, and all that stuff happened. My own thing. I started to look up what's the video of the plane hitting the Pentagon look like. What? I can't find it. Why not? That was my one main thing. I don't know that I was conspiracy minded much prior to that. I now realize, there was a whole decade of Clinton and Troopergate and all these weird things that were on the
1996 conspiracy theory with Mel Gibson to like seed the public. Like, so I wasn't into anything conspiratorial either prior to 9/11. I thought it would be a waste of time. Aliens, whatever. I'm on the Manhattan. I'm living in this amazing apartment. I'm making great money. Like, all that stuff doesn't matter. Like, I'm focused on the goal here. Little did I know. Yeah. All right. So you got your computer.
Enemy of the State in 98 too. Sort of.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
that's right.
That was another big one. Because I remember I was young when I watched that.
And that's filmed in Georgetown.
Scared the shit out of me.
I was living in Georgetown at that point when they were doing that. When that movie came out, those streets that he gets chased on and stuff, I was familiar with those streets. Those are the years of the 930 Club back then. All right, so 2002, you get your laptop. You got electronic music going through your head, but you're not a DJ. When did you discover that you could be your own radio station? Like,
man, I don't know if I realized it as early then, even though, of course, I now see that streaming and podcasts and all those things had been invented by that point, of course. I think I was still probably in the mindset of I work at a place. I would work at a station. I'll work for something. But I started to mix in this weird spoken word stuff into the electronic show that I was doing. I started to play more and more Alex Jones and Dave Von Kleist, and I'm not even sure, Money Masters, any of the stuff that would have been available.
The classics in the early 2000s.
in 02, 03.
Bill Cooper, maybe.
Yeah, Bill Cooper. That's a good one, Tony. Yeah.
I don't know if you ever used Winamp.
Oh yeah. That was my favorite program to use.
It had this essentially the streaming, like you could go flip through audio and video streaming channels. So maybe that was a point where I started to go, oh, these people are they're doing this from their homes. But there were channels on there in the midst, German techno and all the different genres and just, radio of the world, which was fun in and of itself. People were playing truth documentaries.
Yeah.
And so I started to play the audio of those kind of mixed in on the show. And I even just kind of started to do it a little more and more on the radio station in general. I basically I became kind of known as the radio station guy in town. And so we were talking about growing up and seeing this and that, whether it was WKRP or Christian Slater and Pump Up the Volume. All those sort of radio shows and things had a huge effect on me. And even isn't Samuel L. Jackson is the DJ in Do the Right Thing, who acts as kind of the Greek chorus, is shown commenting on the action just a handful of times throughout the movie. But just the world of being a radio personality, host, DJ, or just being literally a radio station, I think that's started to grow more and more in me around then.
Well, let's zero in on Pump Up the Volume. Was that 1991? Somewhere around there?
90, I think.
90. That's a good call. Christian Slater is a misanthropic kid whose parents relocate to a new school district. His parents are kind of well-to-do, doctor, kind of lawyer situation. And he's getting up to no good. And he has discovered how to broadcast pirate radio and just say all sorts of stuff. And people, it's like a cult following where people have to go someplace and listen to find out where the station's going to be that night. And he's got a persona, and but then he comes across a need for that media because there's a scandal going on at the school, and he helps to uncover that scandal and unveil it. And that was the first time when I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I'd never thought of doing anything like that. I never thought I'd be talking into a microphone so much in the future either. But that movie's definitely influential. Got my blackjack gum. Yeah, the whole thing, man. He had a good shtick. Good run of it.
The music, again, at the time, this was, 1990.
Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen. Everybody knows. That was the theme song of the movie, man.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I had that soundtrack. I played that all the time in college, that CD.
For sure. And that, things like that, I realize, I don't know if you remember V. There was a TV series and show called V about the aliens.
Mousy. That it was like whatever episode where he ate the mouse. I remember my mom when I was a kid, like reacting like, "Oh my God." I'm like, "This is cool, Ma. There's reptiles that run the planet, apparently." David Icke took some mushrooms and watched V for a week. Came back and he's like, "Blimey."
And it's like, that's an ontological reality.
There's a scene and setup in there.
Pull that off. Sorry.
What's that?
No, I said only I could pull that off. No, it's good.
There's a scene in there. Yeah. I want to hear. What scene are you talking about?
There's a scene in there where the resistance, the underground, the rebels have infiltrated, and there's going to be this glitzy get together, and they're going to take over this press conference and unmask the demon live on television. And they're they're just able to do it, and they cut the transmission, and I forget if any of it goes out, and maybe some people see it. Those kind of things in movies like that and other sci-fi. That's
or in Carpenter's They Live, right?
Oh yeah,
that sort of thing. The pirate broadcast too. Yeah, this is interesting.
Some of Romero's film was like the various zombie films in the 80s and 90s. He had they didn't do the broadcast that way, but the way it would get it, I don't know. Anyways,
you're right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's one called Night of the Comet. There's a one from the 80s. There's even I've sampled it before. When the authorities are looking for the last couple of kids remaining, there's this radio station. It's like, oh, they shouldn't stray too far from the radio station. That gives them some sense of normalcy, or I forget what it said, but in a lot of media, I realized in sci-fi and all horror, media has something to do with it. Media can save you or damn you. All those things, of course, piled up on me as I, get into researching 9/11, and it was.
When did that start for you? Like, were you getting really hardcore into researching 9/11 and then seeing how it connects to potentially other conspiracies theories? Like, did it happen sort of when you got your first computer? Was it just you asking that one question, like, where's the video of the plane hitting the Pentagon? Was that like sort of the progenitor for it, or?
That was it. It was all of It was all of that. It was being able to have dial up and have internet at an apartment, and having that question. It was literally just having that question.
Yeah,
and having something be unavailable or hidden or something was to tie in with it. So hidden media, obviously, maybe hit all my buttons. I guess. So yeah, I feel like kind of by 02, 03 was into it, as it were. Wasn't talking about it a bunch. It was mostly a thing I kept to myself. There was.
You did say you played it in your music sometimes, like just when you're broadcasting, just intermixing some of it that you would hear from the Winamp channels, for example. Like, was that maybe, I don't know, this is sort of a leading question, but like maybe sort of a subconscious that you like see what it's like, just getting it out there a little bit and intermixed with all this other music. I don't know. It's like an interesting, when you mentioned that, I was like, that's interesting. Like, because we all want to express what we discover and, when it comes to the nature of reality, but it's so hard, especially back then, to sort of like find the channels or the avenue or build the tribe around it to listen to. So I don't know. That was interesting when you mentioned that.
Having the radio station as that playground.
Yeah.
Let me kind of mess with that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Instead of being, play this song, play that song. Hey, right. I just played those two songs. Here's not making, and because it was
becomes your own form of art.
Because it was a college station, we were able to be wild and weird. The wattage, while pretty decent, I would learn later. Of course, I would learn that other schools had far less. It was like 950 watts. Yeah. It got us about a 30-mile radius around where we were, but that was West Virginia, Maryland. And it could get a decent audience. One of the things I know that solidified things for me in some ways, I was in there when George Bush did, I think, essentially one of the first big speeches after 9/11. It was maybe just a week or two after 9/11, back in DC at the Capitol, to everybody, like a State of the Union, where everybody's there and applauds for 8 minutes at everything they say. But that big kind of first speech, I was there at the radio station for whatever reason. If there was something else, because I would help with, I did some training of other students then. But I was essentially running the board, and I wanted to air this speech. But you don't exactly know when things are going to start. So, of course, you have music going. Oh, you're going to, just stop that song. I ended up just sort of in the moment, naturally mixing in, because the speech started, but I didn't hit stop on the music.
And the music was instrumental? Or had a solo going on? Or what like?
It was a little bit of mix it down? It was definitely a train wreck at times. But I just sort of did it and went with it. And that was honestly not just sort of snuck in and buried, but a very full 50-50 mix of, I guess I can now say, like, news and talk, but that it was music and info,
current events,
music and truth music. News.
Becomes like an art form, though. I mean, it's a way to sort of keep the subconscious mind sort of entrained or entranced a little bit, while the conscious mind can more, it's like I call it sort of country day driving a little bit, or something. Like I'm able to take in more information when I have some other tasks going on before, and like being able to sort of mix the music in that capacity, sort of put it in the background, but have something over top. Plus there's also, then there's like the sort of synchronicity people that like to see how music, lyrics, and things sort of match up with reality and play that sort of game, which is interesting in and of itself, because there's a lot of general themes and archetypes that obviously are played through either music or art or whatever medium it might be. So you can sort of see how reality is.
Plus, spoken word is
form of
hard for
poetry.
people to listen to because your brain thinks like 4 times faster than people can listen. Like you can be thinking of other things while other people are talking. Whereas if you have the music in there, you're kind of like tuned into the music,
That's what
and then
I'm
you're
saying,
also
yeah.
getting a message.
Yeah,
Right.
right. That's exactly right.
He started playing with that.
So
Who
I think
told you?
those-
Who told you you could play with such powers?
that also with the very functional thing of, so as part of early on when you're being a DJ trainee at the station, you had what's called a skimmer tape. You had your tape that you would bring in, and this tape deck is wired in to basically only record when you turn the mic on. So you're not recording all the songs and all the stuff. It's basically just recording it's like an air check tape, it can also be called. What do you sound like on air? So you would have to make those, and the faculty, which some were students at that time, they listen to it and give you tips about how to be better. So thinking about how I sounded, listening to the station a bunch, because I couldn't quite get in WHFS, which was the DC alternative station.
Mm-hmm.
It was just far enough away where it was fuzzy and it wasn't worth, trying to. So I listened to the college station more. Listening to other people, listening to other new DJs. There was something about when you turn this mic on and it just sounded like, okay, I'm in this room box now talking. I started to mess with playing with a music bed. So having an instrumental bed for myself, I started again in the 90s at college radio, and that's something that I still do to this day. It gave me, because I felt like listening to some of the people, you're hearing yourself on the headphones, you feel like you have to fill up all the space.
Yeah.
And having music
gives room for pause.
Yeah, gives you time to reflect on what you want to say exactly. Yeah.
And that ties in with Johnny Fever and listening to the radio station with headphones hidden under my pillow at night, right around that window of Dad had quit the church but can't openly listen and buy stuff. I had a little radio and headphones and would hide that under the pillow. And the pop station came in the clearest. It was NXS and George Michael and Bobby Brown by day, but then they were playing
to that as well.
Album cuts of Led Zeppelin and Eagles and kind of classic rock stuff.
That's cool.
Overnight.
Yep.
So getting having a little bit of that education, as it were. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's bonkers the way things have actually gone. So now here we are in 2022. Society's all fucked up. I mean, since the last time we talked.
But they know it now, James. They kind of know it now. Whereas 10 years ago, we had to try so hard to get people to see what we were pointing out. We're like, look, that day in that clip we played, Google had changed their icon, their logo to a barcode that day. Right? That's embedded in that clip from 2009. Just showing the future, it's all going to be QR codes. They didn't have QR codes back in 2009, but they were kind of foreshadowing the digital, non-personal nature of the Brazil Terry Gilliam bureaucracy they're creating.
So to be able to turn my high school morning announcements
into a living, a lifestyle, a movement. So many people have tuned into you over the years, man. And you have this a good music taste. but you have this optimism and you bring like real news. You're not like shying away from hard to do stories. You're bringing real stuff, but you're making people like see that and be like, but we can do something about it. Right. And it's a very unique, artistic, stylized package that you've offered.
Well, a ton of people in the community love your work. It's
it's
the music in the background with like just you have your personality is just it's magnetic. So it's like I run town halls every other week, and I'd always get people come in and saying I listened to Media Monarchy. And I'm like, yeah, of course you did. A lot of people. One universals, we all love music. I mean, I find someone that doesn't love music. I mean, we may not like the same genres of music or whatever. We may come from different generations. I'm obviously a little younger, but at the same time, like we can rally around at least some shared interest in music.
Somewhere out there, Klaus Schwab is listening to Wagner's Valkyries. Dun, 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 dun.
He listens to German house techno, but
that's scary, dude.
It's a secret.
That's scary. That'd be funny.
Drinking the blood, but it's wine, but it's blood. Right.
All right. So now that feels now I get your punk rock indie radio origins. Makes more sense. Because like during that whole time you were doing that, I was raised on like classic rock, and then just 50s and 60s in general, but then 70s I was born into, and then good music stopped. I don't know, sometime in like 2003 they stopped making good music. Apparently I didn't get old. They stopped making good music. They brought in like auto-tune and people who can't play instruments anymore, the computerization of the Rick Rubening of everything.
There's a lot of that. It's become out of control. There's this guy who runs Rick Beato runs this YouTube channel. Like he does these 10.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah. It's really interesting because he was trained in jazz and he does musical theory. So he tells you like why you love these songs and breaks down like the theory behind which like I studied musical theory for many years and played in bands and stuff.
Yeah, Beato is a really cool teacher and a good YouTube presence.
Huge YouTube, and he's been fighting the YouTube algorithm because he tries to teach people these older songs, and he's like, I can't even play them. Then he has to play them out of tune, like because you're not even allowed to play them on YouTube. It's hilarious the shit he's gone through. But he goes on there and does like the Spotify top 10. He's like same 4 chords, same auto tune, same cicada like hi-hat. Like it's exactly the same. Like no one's taking any risks anymore.
We all know how beautiful cicadas sound too. At least James and I do. We get them every 17 or 21 years or something like that part of the world.
But so what's happened? What's happened in these years since we've last talked? This awful president everybody hated happens. Seems like half the country loses their mind. A bunch of the punk rock people
all came out for it.
that I either knew personally or was into their music or admired. Jello Biafra has run the record label for 40 years. Dead Kennedys. To me, that was
Kennedys.
huge.
My friends are huge into that.
You use the Jello Biafra quote all the time. Be the media, right? And then they're like selling out. Like selling out is going out of style or something. They're like, we got to do this quick. We won't be able to sell out in a couple months. Better sell out now.
But I guess I'm not surprised by that happening so a lot of the older cats all are selling their catalogs. Neil Young, Stevie Nicks, Bob Dylan, Springsteen, everybody, all those dudes have all sold. And it makes financial sense. They're not getting any younger.
Right.
It certainly didn't get any easier to tour the last couple of years. And that's unless you are a big giant megastar.
Right.
And even more so then, you're making money on the records and the shows. But generally speaking, bands make their money on shows.
That's right.
They've all sold their catalogs because it's diminishing returns from here on out for them as far as it's concerned. But they can get with black rock and a place that calls itself Hypnosis, and it's HIP GNOSIS. So they
come
are.
On, man, that's my artist name. That's my truth art name. Why? How long have they been using it? I should sue them.
So they're
a play on words.
I got some Banksy like work, and that's my art name. but I can't believe these people.
To the Gnostic agenda of controlling people's minds.
That's how powerful this art yet to be released. Some of which never even got created is they had to take the name for themselves to take away the power. Wow, well played.
So all those dudes selling, to me, it makes commercial sense. But then to see Jello Biafra, circle journey, you name it,
following the steps of Bono and Eddie Vedder is all he's doing.
The Offspring, Joan Jett, Green Day, NoFX,
Green Day, all those guys. I grew up they were all my friends are into that, the punk scene, and to see them all one by one sell out. And then my friends in tandem still frequent shows when they can. They live in big cities now, and they bought into the COVID narrative 100%. And I'm just like, you guys, while they all work their white collar jobs, going to punk shows. And I'm like, this can't be a bigger contradiction. I don't even like, what reality am I simulation?
Sid Vicious rolls in his grave.
Jesus, man. It's so crazy.
So that's the last few years. That's been the biggest thing. That's just, it's, I shouldn't be so surprised. And again, I'm not surprised with giant corporate rock bands. I'm not surprised when it's Dave Grohl or Bono, especially when you learn more and more about them,
who they are.
But when it is,
Grohl's a drummer, but his drummer Tyler just passed away recently. I don't know. I didn't get the details.
There's an occult sort of angle to that. I'm not saying but there's some. It's a strange, because they released some weird horror film a couple months prior to that, where the drummer dies, and then the drummer dies based on an overdose, and somewhere in Mexico, I think, or something.
They released the soundtrack that day.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah,
sacrifice ritual, nothing to see
and,
here.
And the horror and the horror film is some sort of like they're in a satanic cult. Someone gets a hold of like a Necronomicon sort of thing, and gets possessed. And I think Dave Grohl
ends
up
up Johnny Depp in Ninth Gate.
Directed by Roman Polanski
at a Rothschild mansion.
Nothing to see there.
Hey, you mentioned Georgetown earlier. When I went to DC, I had family that lived in DC, and we lived in Southern West Virginia. So it was a little bit of a trip while I was still in public school before college. My first concert, to bring it back to music, that station, HFS, they were doing, and I learned about it from Kurt Lowe. This still amazes me. I learned about an event in advance from MTV and was able to act on that information and go to an event. Seems like most of the stuff is always just, hey, this thing happened, you missed it. Hey, here's clips of this thing you didn't go to. But I heard about this announcement. They were going to do a big festival. They had moved it to RFK Stadium for the first time, and the headliner was going to be NXS. Holy shit. Mom, let's go visit Aunt Norma for the 4th of July in DC. So I can go to this NXS concert.
Was that the Tibetan Freedom Festival, or was that the HFS Festival? Because I thought the Tibetan Freedom Festival was in DC that had like Radiohead and Beastie Boys and Dalai Lama.
Beastie Boys. Well, I haven't listened to that in a long time.
I did that one too. The Tibetan thing was in 98.
Yeah, right.
This NXS show was 93, but same RFK Stadium.
Hutchins died in 93. So you saw one of the last shows with NXS?
They were around for a few more years, but yeah. Right. He died on November 22nd, 1997.
97?
Yep.
It's Mandela effect. Sorry.
Is Alex Constantine still around? Do you know that name?
I haven't heard that name for 15 years, probably.
Okay. That's the hypness I bring to the table. I interviewed him years back, and it didn't seem like he even did that many interviews. And he wrote the Covert War Against Rock, questions about Biggie and Marley and Lennon and all the famous rock star deaths. What are the questions around them? And there's a smidge in there about Michael Hutchins. So of course we were talking about something else as the main topic. But I couldn't wait to ask him about Michael Hutchence.
Well, he popularized autoerotic asphyxiation, which later claimed Robin Williams allegedly. After he made that film about like a thing just like that, I thought there was a thing like that with Robin Williams.
Well, and again, what does it say when our most famous clowns kill themselves? It's another whole sort of weird, sad part of this media monster.
Robin Williams was also in a movie where a comedian became president, just like Zelensky.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, just, saying. Interesting. Those people. Stay away from them. Stay away from them.
Art
Kubrick
imitates
was right.
Life imitates art. Something like that. Wink, wink. Synchronicity.
Yeah. I have to say, James Corbett has been being on New World Next Week with Corbett Report is a ginormous part of my audience. And I know that that's where the majority of people, find me from or did find me from or whatever. That's a huge blessing that I can't not mention as we're sort of taking stock.
How'd that whole thing start? Like, why don't we?
Well, let's go back. You're you're messing up the timeline, Tony. So let's go back.
I do that.
When did you hear your first time? Or when did you hear your first podcast?
It probably was around when I was starting to investigate on my own 9/11 stuff, just via the documentaries that were floating around and things I could find easily on the internet. Probably somewhere around there, because it was Conspiracy Theory Doug. So when I started to look into 9/11, there was a guy in my college town who was into all the stuff. He had a radio show on the college station. I then started to listen because I had reading
Bill Cooper. He's like recovering Bill Cooper's broadcast from earlier today and stuff.
He got James Fetzer on as a guest on the phone.
Fetzer had been a JFK researcher back at that time.
Fetzer does his whole, and this again would have been 02, 03, as late as 04 maybe, but he does his whole from JFK to 9/11 talk, which is one of his talks and books and presentations. That was when it was like, oh, this isn't just they maybe blew up some buildings. There's more of a history.
Yeah, it started with them killing a president, then covering it up, then getting rid of another president in Watergate, and then doing Iran-Contra and BCCI. They got a long Waco, Oklahoma City, 1993 World Trade Center bombing. They got a long resume, these people.
Yeah. And being born in 77, I of course was in school and saw Waco and Oklahoma City and those things play out on the news. So those things, I had at least my own knowledge of that, just having grown up in that era. So that talk really put a bunch of stuff together for me. I think I listened to it live, though. When I really started to listen to podcasts and maybe consciously think of them as podcasts was honestly when I left that college town and moved to Portland, Oregon in 2005. And that's probably around when I reached out to you, because that's around when I heard 9/11 Synchronicity and making essential. So I had a longtime girlfriend in my college town. She and I did theater and productions and stuff together. Once she graduated, she wanted to move on, do other stuff. She knew folks in Portland, Oregon that were starting a theater company. She moves to Portland, Oregon. I was like, oh shit. I'm, born and raised West Virginia. She had moved around a bit in the DC area, Maryland, and West Virginia, ultimately. If we were going to stay together, then I visited once and then decided, because I was actually still, long after graduating, still helping run that college radio station. I wasn't getting paid. It just sort of became a thing. Like I said, if people started dropping off in 94, then by 2004, people kind of recognized it in some ways as like, oh, Jim Pilato runs the radio station. I would get asked on the street, what's that song that says da-da-da? Who sings this song? So that
was there was no Shazam back then. So
no. I realized if I maybe didn't try other things, the college town was very comfortable and fun. People then older than me joked about, oh, you'll get stuck here. So there was a little bit of that, like, oh, I don't want to turn into a townie and never leave here. So took a chance, moved to Portland, Oregon, and essentially kind of started over because I didn't know anybody there. I didn't have any support system. We were living with another couple that were starting this theater company. I did a couple sound design things for them, and that was also something I did in college that helped me get my media chops. Was basically putting soundtracks together for these theatrical productions at the university, because they would do student acted, mostly produced shows in the semesters. And I got into doing the music and the sound effects and stuff for all of this. Was playing in a band at one point, got the band to start doing original music for the plays. And it started to get to this point of like, this could work. We're a band, but we're also producers. We wouldn't have to necessarily be, oh, hey, we're this band and stuck at that forever, because we wanted to do 8 different things. It seemed like making music for theater. It's like, oh, this is getting me back to the wanting to do film. Like, this is still getting me back to my, earliest loves. All the while, I'm getting more into 9/11 and conspiracies, and the couple I play music with are getting promotions at the Washington Post, and it's tough to get them for band practice. When I moved to Portland, pretty much all that was donezo as far as the college radio station, as far as the band went. And that was when, and I had messed a little bit with a blog spot before I had moved. But I basically launched Media Monarchy when I moved to Portland, Oregon. Because there no one knew me. No one had any expectations of me. But I could use all of my music and radio and media background to start doing this thing that seems really important, and there's this new avenue to be able to do it. I don't have to have my own transmitter and take readings and do all that stuff. I can do a recording, and I can't remember. Actually, there was a pirate internet station in Portland. That's where I started Media Monarchy in the radio show in 2006. We're up to now.
All right. So you got a pirate radio station in Portland, and that's 2006. I had not known about podcasting until I found it as a functional solution to get audio out to the internet. I was like, oh, there's this thing called podcasting. So I hadn't listened to any podcast. I had listened to prisonplanet.tv because I was a subscriber and I got the inside scoop on the stuff every day. But by the time that you're picking up your own thing, so you create a website, you got a pirate radio station, you got kind of a format and a unique thing that you do and you're bringing to, and no one else is doing this type of thing. And then that just kind of became a good, consistent, pace for you, right? So how often were you doing it every day? Was it doing it once a week? How did you start out as far as pacing?
It was the side passion thing. And I didn't start doing the radio show, and I was, posting to the website, posting to the blog. I didn't start the radio show until I got a job in Portland. That just felt like the right thing to do. And got a cool job at a cool small grocery store chain, super, like a competitor to Whole Foods, was a lot of local and organic.
It was like Whole Foods before Whole Foods was really a thing, because it was there was a Whole Foods when I lived in Virginia in the late 90s, but otherwise across the country it wasn't a thing yet. So you had a local place. I remember when you were working at the grocery store back in the day. I was going
And
to
that
ask,
was,
is that when you were working at the grocery store? But I didn't want to guess wrong.
yep. So yeah, like 2006 to 2012, I worked at this grocery store while I did Media Monarchy on the side.
I remember that.
I
We
would
reference it
post.
sometimes.
I would post to the website through the week, and then that became then the stuff I would talk about on Friday morning on the Portland Radio Authority, and I would record myself. I had an early. It's funny. It was called a Zoom. Back then, Zoom was the H2, the little audio recorder.
Yeah, I still got one of those. I got an H2, I got an H4N.
We've used
them. Yeah, those were audio recorders. Okay, so you use the Zoom. Good.
So I put that in the chain between the headphone out, so I would at least know, like, okay, I'm recording what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Because I knew there weren't going to be a ton of people listening live. I went at it as I'm doing this to make a recording that I'm going to upload myself. I was never really counting on them to promote me in any way. They were just a great platform, and I guess if I can get into a routine, and if we're sort of talking about best work practices, I love a routine, and if I can get into a routine, I can do the hell out of it. So that's even why it makes it easier to sort of, I do an 8-hour stream Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Getting into that routine and knowing, hey, I do this on the weekend. It also, again, it felt really fucking important then. It felt like Bushes and the crazies and the skull and bone, they're going to kill us all. And 9/11 Truth was a very urgent thing.
Yeah, it was back then.
Now, I haven't checked lately, but I used to be able to go to your website and go all the way back to the beginning. You still have all your posts online from everything you've ever done?
I do. It's unfortunately a little broken. It's a little wonky.
Do you still have all the original recordings?
I have like 99% of it. There was a few things that got lost, but I think I knew I lost them then.
It's super useful for people to reference back to be like, what was going on at that time? It's like, it's important to history. So I want to make sure it gets preserved.
It's an interesting time capsule.
Yeah.
Something I'm now able to do on my own stream. So when I should we rocket forward to more of the present day?
Well, I wanted to nail down before people like look at what you're doing today and say it's impossible for me to do. I wanted them to understand how you took it step by step and you overcame challenges along the way. You didn't always know how it was going to work out, but you headed in the right direction anyway. Your optimism, your attitude of gratitude has always remained consistent and intact. And then slowly, as you got more confidence and you're like, I could do this myself. And by 2012, you and Corbett had probably kicked off New World Next Week. And you got 1,000 episodes under your belt now. And Media Monarchy has been running for 16 years. And you got it going on. So I didn't want people to look at you like this is the unattainable goal to be like James Evan Pilato someday. I wanted it to be like, no, we're just regular dudes who applied ourselves over time consistently.
Mm-hmm. I have a little of a funnier angle.
Good. Thank you.
You weren't going to be a media. You even just said, you're like, I can't believe I talk into the microphone so much. I wanted to talk into the microphone so much. Corbett was going to be a teacher. The world's funny and it's all turned out this way. I'm doing the thing I've wanted to do, but it's not the flavor that I exactly thought it would be. So then it gets funny at times to get the outreach of, hey, how do you do your thing? To just get an email and go, hey, how do you do that? Okay, well, go back to public school and talk a bunch. Yeah, it's I don't know, the same, what's the meme about?
Be a class clown.
How do you, explain your stances or your sources on these things? It's I don't know how to explain 20 years of work and research to somebody who's arguing with me about some current event.
Yeah. And quickly, public school, we have a shortage of comedians in the world because public school's job is to destroy comedians. And I was in 6th grade with this kid who was hilarious, could make everybody laugh. they sent him back to 5th grade, and then he stopped being funny. That's how it works.
Man, if I were in school now, they'd try and put me on all kinds of drugs. They would, I don't know what on earth they would, because I was defiant and sort of, against their
questioning and therefore intelligent. And
Oppositional
therefore,
defiance disorder.
yeah,
or
that's
whatever.
oppositional.
exactly.
You're ODD, man. You got the oppositional defiance disorder, bro.
Just keep adding them.
Go to the rubber
DSM.
room. Go sit in the rubber room. Learn your lesson.
There's a funny thing on, I think it was Sunday school, like a Sunday school report card or whatever they would call it.
They had report cards at Sunday school. Oh,
Jim thinks he's whispering. That's kind of been a quote that I love and hate, that's followed me, and I laugh about it still to this day. Jim thinks he's whispering. So that's been a huge, when I think about what I do and run my mouth, but try and do it in an important way. It's funny to think that comes from Sunday school, and then realizing you had to go to like the satanic panic and all that. It's like, wait, they weren't completely wrong. It's realized like you're wrong about certain things. You're right about some elements of it.
like McCarthyism during the 50s. Like he's actually right when you look at the tax exempt foundations, but the way he went about doing it was unethical, and he's focusing on the wrong areas. Like he didn't quite understand the totality of it. Same thing with Satanic Panic. I mean, that was hilarious. Like, don't play
So young
Dungeons
Jimmy
and Dragons or
Pilato
something like that. It's like, what?
Was known for saying the quiet part out loud. You were ahead of your time there, man.
It
Tim thinks he's
worked out.
whispering.
And I spent a bunch of time, and you realize later how some things were. I think my dad's dad was as many of our parents' were, pretty gruff, tough SOBs, maybe not real loving, because they probably went through some hard, hefty times. Mom and Dad didn't make us. We didn't have to join sports. We didn't have to practice a musical instrument. They didn't make us do stuff like that because I think they were kind of forced to do. If not that, then my dad tells the story of his dad, waking him up on Saturday at 6 a.m. of just you think you're sleeping, like you're working in the yard, like get your ass out there, kind of stuff.
That's how I was brought up, dude. What are you talking about? That was how your dad was brought up. That was happening in my generation too. Cancel Cartoon Day. It wasn't for Catholics, it was for people cutting wood on Saturday.
So my brother and I think we're able to sort of be in our rooms and explore the things that we were into. He was able to draw and paint and stuff in his room. And early on, I was into and this is the perfect mix of it all too, the storybook records. When you hear the sound, turn the page. Mm-hmm. The Star Wars and Indiana, shit like those things. Oh, yeah. Loved those.
Yeah, classics.
So I had a record player in my room as a little kid with those records. That was pretty much it. Then get a little older, and it's like, hey, why aren't there more records? We got rid of all those when we became born again Christians. I don't think they had any giant record collection, but growing up, it was like, oh, I know you guys had records, but they're all gone.
It was all Lawrence Welkin stuff anyway. You're not missing anything.
I saw Corbett reports, posts, and podcasts. I don't know exactly how things were getting passed around or shared, or how I first heard about it or saw him or heard him.
Well, he started like 2007, and then like people were already looking to the internet for such things, and then when he started posting, it got posted at like 911truth.org or someplace like that. I think I probably saw it first.
I'm trying to think of you might be right. So I emailed Corbett first and said, hey man, heard the show, sounds good, keep it up. And that started from there. That's pretty much around the time the economy collapses of 2008, the Bush-Obama bankster bailout happens, which we're directly referencing in that 2009 clip. That has so much effect in the grocery store. And now it seems like people are fortunately hip to it a little bit, but Shrinkflation was when companies were making their products a little smaller instead of raising the price because they know people will notice the receipt is higher. Then you'll notice the tuna can is a half ounce smaller than it used to be. I was stocking the shelves, so I saw these items come in because when you get a new item, you'll have to change out the code, the UPC code. All that shit has to change. There's some digit difference. So it made it that much more noticeable that, hey, they're rolling out these new sizes.
Yeah, you're like all of a sudden not 12 on the shelf, but I could fit 14 across on the shelf. And what's going on with this? Am I
exactly? And there's a whole science and field of people who work on the set of grocery shelves of how they're supposed to be and what's going to go and what goes where.
They call it consumer behavior. I was a senior in college when all this went down, and I was a marketing major at Penn State of all places. So like they were teaching us essentially as the economy is. I remember taking a 400 level, whatever that meant, like finance course, and the professor sitting up there could not describe to us what the hell is happening in regards to the finance. I'm like, okay, if this guy doesn't know, like even professors at universities, majors, supposedly universities and all this stuff have no idea what the hell is going on. This is something at this point I've done enough psychedelics at that point to realize reality doesn't seem what it seems. So I was already getting into it. Figured there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, but yeah,
it's the metaphor of the glasses and they live.
Yeah, they live. It's a metaphor.
So that's around when I coined the phrase "food world order." I said it on air on one of my Friday shows still at the Portland Radio Authority. It kind of came to me. I said it, and as soon as it was out of my mouth, I was like, "Oh, I like that. That's good. We'll put a pin in that for later." But that's what was happening, and those were probably the things. I guess Corbin and I first started to. I think he stole my title and made it an episode title of the podcast and had me on as a guest.
Probably talked about like Tom Vilsack being a revolving door with Monsanto or something that was going on back then. So Food World Order stuck. And then Corbett's like, hey, I'm going to make an episode on that. I'll have you on. And he knew how to do interviews on Skype. Apparently, isn't that what he probably did back then? I was still doing audio. I was just learning how to edit video at that point. But he was already like Johnny on the spot. He's like, oh, I can use Skype.
He says not too long into the kind of the food story collabs. I think I want to start making videos. I think obviously that's where everything's going. Mm-hmm. So he very much, very consciously said, like, I think I'm going to start making videos. Whether or not he asked me, do you have any ideas? I'm sure I immediately came up with some. And it's been a fantastic collaboration, I think, ever since.
That's incredible resources. Oh yeah, now go for it.
It feels super low tech to now, like we've been doing the show for 12 or whatever, New World Next Week for almost 13 years. Still pretty low tech. We've got it down to a science as far as the way we do the show. But I named the show. I sort of they would call it like a broadcast clock. Like, what would you do in your hours? You had 9 minutes and 59 seconds on YouTube then.
Yeah.
As the cap of your uploads. And because we, there was no video editor. We were still very much doing everything ourselves.
Didn't the CFR have a podcast back then called The New World Next Week or something like that? And you took the name from that and you're like, we'll spin it back at them.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. They have, it might still be going on. The World Next Week was their thing.
World Next Week,
So I came up with New World Next Week. Figured, hey, if this is a video, it's a not 10-minute thing. We could do 3 stories. That gives each story a few minutes each, and gives us a couple of minutes in between, or for some seconds, I suppose, in between those stories. And that was basically how we started to do it. We would pitch what 3 stories are we going to talk about. The way I was doing the Media Monarchy page was, what would they call it? Like news aggregation, which was still pretty difficult then.
Yeah.
I posted a lot of news, so then I felt like colleagues and folks could then have that to pick through. So a lot of it probably there were stories that I had posted to Media Monarchy that we talked about on New World Next Week.
It's amazing some of the topics you're able to discover, though, because you guys would pick topics that were just, I don't know, like, I mean, I've been watching it for 12 plus years or something like that, but find topics that would even go under the radar for alternative media in many respects. And you guys still do that. Like, I still tune in knowing you're going to cover something that we may not have covered on GTW, or I'm missing the context to in some capacity, or, everyone's looking at Russia, Ukraine, what's going on over, XYZ. And it's just, you guys have a great sort of feel for, and you're ahead of your time too, because like everything's sort of like low budget production now. It's just about if you have good audio and some sort of working webcam.
Their educated guesses worked out well. Like Corbett, that was good guidance, because at the same time, like I ended the 9/11 Synchronicity podcast with 2 video episodes that were films, and I was betting on Google, where you could upload anything of any length. Google so video. If I made a 6-hour film, I could put it on Google and they would show it. But to put it on YouTube, I had to make 35 pieces of it, or whatever the thing was. And like, you guys made something that's 10 minutes. It fit perfectly in the YouTube format. My stuff never did back then. And I bet I chose poorly, but I still made bets. I still got on the field and made actions and took those failures and went forward.
Some of those earliest videos, I had the stopwatch on my side. I basically watched the clock because we didn't want to have to do a bunch of post-production. And we still, to this day, essentially shoot it like it's live. And now, thank goodness, we've got Brock West, who's been Corbett's video editor for a long time now. As things got crazier and Corbett got bigger, in some ways it was like, I'm the weird music. I'm the weird animated guy on New World Next Week who rants and raves about the shit.
Color commentary.
Corbett's all, that's
play by play. Your color commentary.
It's literally teacher and class clown. So that does really kind of
the dynamic is perfect. Yeah.
Really but I have said, there have been times where I've said to him, it's like, man, hey, thanks for still having me along. Like, thanks for still having me as a guest and doing a thing. I know that could change my audience. That if we ever stop doing a thing together, it'd be like, oh, that's, I think of it sometimes as like we're in a band together and he got really famous. But I was like, yeah, but the bass player, he has a band too. So I know I've joked at times, it's like, hey, thanks for still having me. And honest to God, he has said, he's like, man, you're one of the few people that hasn't lost the fucking plot. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school. We have been at this for a long time. We have seen lots of our friends and colleagues maybe lose the plot in doing this.
That's very difficult to, you have to sort of steel your mind, have a sort of fortitude and conviction and courage to continue forward, because covering the news is not, even when I started working with Rich over 10 years ago and even living with him a little bit, like, it was tough. It was an emotionally rough patch going for this couple of years, really helping them build up the studio and trying to get more productions out there. And even I sort of felt I had to take some time off.
He was in his mid-20s. I had 10 years advantage of seasoning from the world. Yeah. But you're right. A lot of people,
but it's still tough, man.
They burn out, they break down, or they lose the plot. That's a more common thing than the burnout. You'd have to work really hard to burn out.
And of course, it helps when they completely change the plot every 4 to 8 years, and so many people go wild those times.
Yeah, I was against war every administration during this century, not just a couple of them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and I think people lost that plot too. There used to be an anti-war movement in this country, and it doesn't exist anymore. like it could or should.
Mhm. So I mean, when I'm feeling
That's
the
true.
most like chuffed, like is that the British word for like stoked? Like feeling the most like, yeah, is now looking at what's become of my beloved punk rock and think about early truth movement stuff. And I have to go, man, we maybe fucked up the world way more than any of those punk bands ever could have hoped for.
Oh, it's more of a facade for most of them. That's the thing. I mean, it's a time where, you know, you're trying to have an identity with something. We oftentimes identify with like the music that we love when we're growing up, and sort of punk is that sort of like rebel without a cause sort of mentality.
I was just thinking
a little
James
bit.
Dean, dude. It's so
Yeah,
James Dean.
it's
Yeah,
rebel
they
without
made a
yeah.
caricature of that, dude. A ritual
And like
sacrifice.
yeah.
Paul Walker.
And
What?
because
Sorry.
all my friends, I just laugh because like we were also into
something
punk.
was in my headset. Oh, sorry.
Well, and I mean, for the same reason, no one was interested in the college radio station after Nirvana. It was the same thing I had seen in friends from high school just that previous year or so before we all would, you know, go away, graduate, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That they went from the flannel to the tie-dye deadhead thing, like
yeah,
kind of overnight. And all my punk friends all became, you know, deadhead, fish heads, all started to follow the jam band scene.
A lot of mine got into like, it was big when I'm the younger generation. It was all like emo and hardcore and these sorts of things. That was like what blew up when I was in high school. And so like they sort of when I was really young, we're into like NoFX and Screeching Weasel and stuff like that. Then we go to, you know, My Chemical Romance or something like Thursday or something like that, or Finch and all these weird. It was just a weird transition. And then now they're into like death metal. So I don't know how they go. It's weird.
My Chemical Romance, sponsored by Pfizer.
Well, yeah, right. While they go to like, you know, their white collar jobs being mostly doctors and lawyers, which I just get such a kick out of, and get their third booster shot or something like that. And I'm like, how does this equate? I don't. Too many contradictions. My brain is being overloaded.
So my wife and I went from, you know, being essentially, you know, being able to work in the industries while still being truther weirdos. We were able to have kind of a foot in each world.
Yeah.
That door all slammed 2 years ago. She's never taken the jab. It never came down to she had to get it or she'd get fired. She's always done a lot of event-based audio-visual productions and things. She's good at what she does. Being good at what you do can sometimes hey, they didn't try and push all the stuff on you because they know they need you to do this job. That's only become more so down in a much smaller market of Santa Fe, New Mexico, as opposed to being in Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm. Good point. That's a good point.
But now that's all wrecked. Media Monarchy, definitely through the years, election years, that's always a boost. There'll always be a bit of an audience boost in an election year. It just gets people going, grinds their gears. They'll be more engaged in stuff. But it's never been anything like the COVID years. It's essentially ever since the pandemic, people are huge into alternative media.
Yeah.
The show's grown. It's been able to grow a bunch. Went to Japan, met Corbett in 2019. You know, 3 months later, the world breaks.
It's lockdown, yeah.
But we had essentially, this was another, you know, I like having the ideas, and, you know, Corbett was manufacturing DVDs on his own in his room with a half-broken duplicator tower. It was like, let us try and be the American store, essentially. So long story short, we launched New World next week because he's been kicked off of YouTube. He's been kicked off of Patreon. All those sort of older platforms in some ways. Like, oh, you're going to kick us off of those? Okay. We'll set up a snail mail
Yeah.
post office box and open a store. So it's newworldnextweek.com. We've started to produce Corbett Report documentaries on DVD in a nice chunk. So we've got 4 that we've been able to produce that are in the store. 9/11 Trillions, 9/11 War Games is stuff about the insider trading, the war games going on 9/11.
Yeah.
Who is Bill Gates? Which is the more recent one.
That's a recent one. That was a good one. Yeah. Well, all the stuff he does is good. But
The How and Why Big Oil. That's a nice one. And again, this has all worked out really well for the kid who just wanted to be a record label to hook up with a dude who has a bunch of content that's actually kind of edgy and suppressed. So the way that a bunch of this has kind of come together, I'm super stoked to be selling more DVDs than maybe some punk bands are selling albums.
Right. Yeah.
Now.
Oh, absolutely. That's so, yes. And serendipity, and you made it a reality by just reaching out, like being willing to like go out on a limb and just like email them. It's like, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing. And then from there, like building a relationship. And that's all it takes. I mean, I did the same with Rich. It's like, hey, I enjoy
by
your stuff.
having that store, like you're putting the offer out there. Hey, I got these things. Right. And when I found out about the store from LD, I'm embarrassed to find out that Control Room told me about your store one night on the show. Next day I went in, I was like, I'll buy one of everything that's in stock. What do you got? And those DVDs we need more of them. We need the other stuff he's done. So keep producing them, and people are going to keep buying them because we're going to keep letting them know. You need it in your archive for your family so you can have some freedom, because you can't depend on the internet anymore.
Not anymore.
I've always been a physical media nerd. So it goes back to just wanting to collect records and magazines and comics and stuff. It only now comes back around that it's like, I told you guys you couldn't trust all this digital stuff. Of course, I still loved it and have relished using the streams and Spotify and YouTube.
I read
and all
PDFs every now and then too, but I like physical media too. You know, it's like my physical graffiti. This is my Led Zeppelin version of just like create your own surroundings with the graffiti of the people doing the things.
So a couple years ago, and this is one of the things that helped get Corbett kicked off of YouTube. And again, the coordinated effort for which at the same moment, all these platforms agree to get rid of Alex Jones or James Corbett or Ryan Christian or The Last American Vagabond.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, this seems like it's obviously a coordinated effort. The Century of Enslavement, the history of the Federal Reserve, is a James Corbett documentary that Chris, what's his name, on MSNBC made a segment out of. Did you know that if your kid goes to YouTube and, they've got homework or whatever, types in Federal Reserve, this crazy conspiracy junk is what comes up as one of the top results? That was a bit of a stink. It was, of course, it's hilarious to sort of to have those sort of funny media moments of like, hey, we're conventionally famous for a minute.
Yeah.
But to now, and I've got the notes to make it happen, because it's all about writing a million Post-it notes that you can't see. I want to send that dude physical copies of Century of Enslavement. And basically sit, because of course he works at media. I know how media works. I know how to submit things to media to where it's like, hey, I'll know how to get it to hopefully to at least to his people.
Yeah.
Send a couple copies along with a note and just say, hey man, thank you. Thanks for the inspiration. So now, this might be poking.
Let me tell you about the Streisand effect.
Troll.
Send a definition of the Streisand effect with the DVDs and be like, we've sold millions. Thank you.
But am I poking the bee's nest though, and just causing trouble for? Because again, the store exists through a third party. I don't own the website, the store function. Yeah. But that kind of thing, I love the idea of being able to send him those and say, hey, thanks, you've helped, inspire greater propagation of this work. And
people are putting that in their family safe. It's right next to the family Bible. It's getting passed on to the next generation. so you can see what happened and what we inherited.
And something we should say, even in closing, I should wrap it up for myself. We should do a repress of Ultimate History Lesson. We should do a one-off, like however many we press at once, and put Ultimate History Lesson on newworldnextweek.com, the store, because myself and James Corbett were producers, essentially, part of that documentary. We're on the box.
Yeah, your logo's on the back. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I was thinking similar. We're out of stock on it. I got to find the digital masters to get it done. And I would like to have it in that store. That would be an honor. And I think the people interested in those other pieces of media in there that jive with John's take on things for sure.
Now, my other promotional thing on the store is probably one of the biggest things we had ever done. And this
Casolaro?
The Casolaro radio
That's
play.
a classic, yeah.
We would have never been able to really, really pull that off, I don't think, if Cassie would have still been at a regular job and COVID hadn't happened. We had talked about it. We had talked about radio plays because his death happened in West Virginia, not far away from our college town. It has this kind of, it's a West Virginia story. We made a radio play out of the story of the death of Danny Casolaro that was written and produced at our college. So back in 96, because Casolaro died, found dead.
In the motel room, and all his notes were missing and everything, but everyone said nothing to see there.
In 91. So we basically dropped the radio play and that was a goal for me as well, on the 30th anniversary. But in 1996, a playwright named John Klein, Jon, he had a play called Octopus that my university produced as part of their summer theater festival. So I mentioned earlier, the semesters had the student-run shows. The summer actually has what's called Contemporary American Theater Festival, CATF. It has now been around for 30 years. It is a very reputable theater festival up and down the East Coast. New American plays is what it's always been. So it never was doing Shakespeare or Our Town. It was always literally doing brand new American plays.
Octopus Conspiracy, Promise Software meets Journalist meets Death.
And I would slowly figure out that the director at the theater department, it was like he was obviously into conspiracy stuff, or he wouldn't have chosen to do this play.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few places I think it was ever produced. And again, knowing a little bit of how that world works, actually also had some help with a Media Monarchy member whose real life has theater work as well. We secured the rights from John Klein. It was all, above board. We had the rights to do it at radio play, and we can distribute it in perpetuity as we wish. We went to West Virginia. We cast almost all West Virginia actors and produced this thing and was able to get it up and have it as this radio play, a 5-part thing. I love old school Orson Welles, kind of old time radio, it's called. So we did it in that mold. So there's 5 episodes. So I could play those episodes over Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah. That's on the store. Not only is the 2-hour or however it runs radio play up there, it's actually a 4 gig zip file that has all of my work and research on Danny Casolaro. It has all of Corbett's stuff, and it has multiple documents, PDFs, all the unsolved mystery segments, all the ones they did in Australia, other news segments. So it's a giant 4 gig kind of supplemental package that I would say in a bunch of ways would be inspired by the kind of work that you do. A comprehensive look at a topic, and
full
not just a
look.
10-minute YouTube video.
Yeah, package it up for the future. Let them decide. Give them the the ability to make clear choice, because we didn't get that. I think it's a nice thing to do. All right, so Danny, Yeah, so Danny Casolaro, radio play, you did that in 2021 on the 30th anniversary. In the timeline, I skipped over my question on Clyde Lewis. When did you come to know Clyde Lewis? When did you come to assist with the show? Tell us about that for a second.
So when I moved to Portland in 05, I learned there were a couple of hosts and people who were doing things, doing a podcast, doing a show. There was a guy named Alex Ansary, and there was a guy named Clyde Lewis.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard of either of those guys prior. Alex Ansary is, pretty much my age. He was much, like me, activated by the events of 9/11. I would learn Clyde Lewis was a radio guy and had been doing radio since the mid 90s. Shock jock here and there. I don't think it wasn't what it is back in the 90s. He is one of the early dudes credited with to go back to mixing things together. He's one of the early Pink Floyd Wizard of Oz progenitors.
Interesting.
Not that he came up with it, but was one of the people going and doing it on air.
It's one of the greatest mysteries of life, because I've heard from the guy, like I've heard interviews with the guy who was the line producer on that album. He swears up and down there was nothing to do with that, but it's an amazing experience, especially if you're tripping on mushrooms, to watch that whole synchronicity come together.
So I learned that these dudes are in Portland, and Portland's my first city I've ever lived in. So it's a bigger place. There's public transportation. There's stuff going on. We kind of started to appear on each other's shows a little bit. Hey, I'll interview me. We'll talk about this. So you come with my show. So we became essentially colleagues. The best thing we did, I think, together work-wise early on, we did a publicity stunt of burning the 9/11 Commission report on I believe the 8th anniversary. I think it was in 2009. We wrote up a press release, sent it to all the places because we were media guys. It's like, hey, I know how this works. How do you get people to come out to your thing? Much like invitations to a party or whatever, you send out a bunch to get one. I forget which affiliate they are, Coin 6. They came and covered our event. We burnt the book in the park. There was, a dozen or two other truthers there. They filmed us. They do a couple words with us. And they include us on their package that night. So it was their 9/11 anniversary coverage, as of course all the news stations do every year since then. So it was local Portland Coin, ABC affiliate. It was the year the Quran burning was a giant thing. That was the big controversy. People are going to burn the Quran in protest to those Muslims that got us. The reading of the names of the dead in D.C. and New York, that's, of course, always part of the packet that they'll run. And then at the end of it, it's like, but back here in Portland, a very different type of, gathering was taking place at, the park, where local media, radio hosts, I think they called me Evan Pilato, and Clyde Lewis are burning the 9/11 Commission report. And we wrote it into the thing, said, this is a publicity stunt. Burning books is kind of stupid, but we knew it would get your attention.
Yeah. And
we just want to say 9/11, remember, it's the blank check. There's wars and stuff that are still going on. We're 8 years out now, and 9/11 is still the reason. I was able to get the Max Cleland soundbite on the air. Max Cleland, congressman, representative, he was one of the 9/11 commissioners. He resigned, said it was a farce. So I was able to basically cite this guy, cite his name. Of course, it had been in the news. And say, if he does, if the commissioners don't believe the 9/11 report, why should you? So we got on the news. Clyde and I were, it was awesome. It felt like, again, back in this era of a real kind of truther breakthrough, that we were able to get this information out to people on mainstream avenues. And is it around the same time what people are, yelling and disrupting Bill Maher's live show? It was this point of like confrontations, I guess. Flash forward a few years, Clyde Lewis is still doing Ground Zero radio in Portland, and he gets picked up for national syndication because by 2012, conspiracies are hot business. His show gets picked up by the same place that syndicates Coast to Coast AM.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we become the opening act for George Norrie Coast to Coast on all kinds of stations all around the country. And because Clyde knew me, because he knew Media Monarchy, because he knew I knew my stuff, I had the job immediately. This
As his
only
producer.
happened because I quit smoking cigarettes. I was at the grocery store, the aforementioned grocery store. When I quit smoking cigarettes, I quit cold turkey and was just an anxiety attack. Was wiggy. Because I'm high strung, I suppose. High metabolism. Cigarettes had been some amazing crutch. And once that was gone, I was a wreck. Found myself at the grocery store, still stocking shelves, being like, damn, really? I thought I was going to be at a record label or in a band or something like, but here I am, 35 almost at this grocery store. It's cool, but this, I knew I could do bigger and better things. So I started to actually just see if there were other jobs around. And I see that Clyde had gotten picked up for national syndication because I was looking for media jobs in Portland. I hadn't actually heard the news. He never asked me because he knew I was Media Monarchy and New World Next Week and worked at the store and didn't entertain it. He was like, oh, he'll never do that. And if things were stayed regular, I wouldn't have. But I was wiggy, looking for a change, and I found one. So then suddenly I'm the executive producer of this nationally syndicated paranormal conspiracy talk show from 7 to midnight, Monday through Friday. Kind of grueling. That's a bunch of airtime for commercial radio.
That's a massive amount.
Yeah.
Got to
That's
talk to all the people, met a lot of different folks. Was able to meet and interview Jordan Maxwell. I played some of those clips a couple weeks ago when he passed. It was awesome. It was like the tippy top of, the conspiracy business, I guess, as it were, because it was a commercial radio station. Yeah. Hold on. We'll tell you more about the deep state plot to kill you right after these messages. So it's still weird, though.
Yeah.
I loved it because it was obviously the biggest audience and a live thing. Sandy Hook happened while I was there. Boston Marathon, essentially these big events happened, that we could go over essentially day by day in real time. Sandy Hook also became the only thing Boss Man ever said, I don't ever want to hear the word Sandy Hook come out of your mouths on the air again. Because we lost a sponsor. At least one. We might have lost a couple more. Some dude was pissed, took it upon himself to take clips of the show and send those to some of the sponsors to basically go, hey, did you know that you sponsor this? Some short clip of Clyde talking about Sandy Hook. We lost the Red Wing. Is that shoes?
Yeah.
We lost them as a sponsor.
Yeah.
And that was the only time that the bosses said, hey, don't talk about that. So it's kind of funny because that's obviously one of the biggest, still kind of strangest events. I was
right,
why did Alex Jones get sued into oblivion for 9/11?
Or anything else he commented on. He's commented on so many different topics, but the one thing he's getting taken, dragged through the mud with is Sandy Hook. just that you're not allowed to talk about that one. And there's a lot of weird occult significance around it. And you have the whole Super Bowl thing. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of weird
Sandy Hook
stuff
and
around that.
Pizzagate were like two of the most
Two, yeah,
taboo
Pizzagate's
things.
another one. You're not, yeah, that's so.
And that, I mean, that brings us back, Rich, to our the last time we talked was I was going, and I had some folks in the Media Monarchy community that were helping, but yeah, diving into Pizzagate. And I remember in that interview, it was like, step away from the Pizzagate stove. It's like, this is obviously becoming a giant kind of trap.
Yeah, it's like a honeypot trap
honey,
type of thing. Winnie the Pooh wouldn't do so well with it.
And anymore, that's all I can see. Any of the big stories, I can't help but just see them anymore as, this is some troll job. Fake left is trying to pull on fake right, or vice versa.
But like back then, if I remember correctly, like it was the end of October, right before Trump got elected. WikiLeaks had come out with the Hillary Clinton emails. We were emailing back and forth, and I saw the pizza logo with the Hillary Clinton, like it was like a logo, it was a symbol. And I said to you on Twitter, hey, is this a real thing? Is this really in the WikiLeaks email from Hillary? And it is, it's a real thing. And I got touched by who turned out to be Hillary Clinton's like CIO that flies with her on the planes, this guy, Nick, and went to my site. And I just happened to be testing a new firewall while I was tweeting with Pilato. And I saw, and I looked, and it's like, oh, this guy has he has a setup in New York City. And they just came to my place because of that that tweet I had sent. And I was like, not looking to be on a Clinton body count right now. So yeah. That's how they end. Yeah.
And so now that's the odd funny spot, me, you, Corbett, and others that have now been at it for so long. Yeah. To kind of find ourselves in a spot where it's like, well, I don't see myself getting pinned down on anything anymore, because it almost all seems to be, troll bait, hoaxes and tricks.
Yeah. They got a lot
they
of
found a way to build like epistemological sort of cartoons around it. So like if you try to cover something maybe substantial or some sort of circumstantial evidence around it that might be legitimate, or you can actually point to as being an artifact from those situations, then someone's going to run with it, some other media personality, and they're going to associate you, a sort of guilt by association sort of fallacy, and associate with those types of people that will just build some sort of like weird cartoonish fantasy out of it. And though it's a way they can sort of like, without having to go to such extremes as like creating another body count, which is just marginalize individuals that are actually trying to find the truth to what happens. And so they have a little bit more sophisticated, I guess, a little bit less blood spilled.
But it's like the conspiracy part is now sort of baked in from the get-go on events. And so that there will inevitably be some conspiracy angle. And so even that, it's like, they're even serving up the conspiracy angle for you too. Yeah.
In order to control that narrative, they're already baking it into the pie that they're
giving a wink and a nod with it.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. I mean, it's an important point, because it's a perfect like red herring sort of straw man they can build later on. So like if you try to find anything artifactual from it that you can point to as being truly evidentiary of what's happened, it doesn't matter. It was baked into this. It was baked into it. There are other media, other personalities commenting on it that you can easily dismiss. And so they can lump people as part of this sort of outrage culture, this sort of almost Frankfurt School modeling alongside cybernetics, alongside transhumanism, all the sort of machine interfaces that we use, and see like how much they can manipulate the social experiment in almost like a Black Mirror sort of fashion. Or like in Black Mirror, like the 50,000 credits episode, the dude is riding a bicycle to try to get out of his predicament by earning credits by riding a bicycle. But then he ends up just becoming a conspiracy theorist, getting to actually be in essentially a larger prison cell, getting to broadcast his conspiracy theory about how there's controllers controlling. It's like it's almost that level of like crazy recursion, if you will, like a fractal from chaos or fractal of hell or something like that.
So it's to the point now. It's like, okay, they're really going to do this. We're going to go Red Dawn because that's what they trained. That's what I was, to go back to the 80s again. Yeah. The satanic panic and the Russia thing.
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna live in, we're gonna fight the commie invasion. But is it, or am I gonna be Woody Harrelson in 2012? Okay, you're gonna make me the crazy radio guy. Okay, is that how this has all been cast and made for me?
Either way, it's still member Barry. It's all. It's all back.
All right. So, did you ever get to go to film school?
No.
No. Are you still interested in learning how to edit film?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm more into, I think, trying to make Media Monarchy a 24/7 broadcast.
But people like video, so maybe you got some videos that roll. Like maybe you take your stuff, make it like,
or 12 hours video, 12 hours audio. I'm toying with a bunch of ideas. Having Cassie, she's more the video brain anyway. So I know that stuff we're going to be able to kind of work on a bit of that.
Yeah.
I mean, what's funny is I did video, man. I had it with Ustream.
I remember that.
There it
I
is.
cursed it. I swore I'd never live stream again after that.
Oh man, Ustream was a nightmare.
I'll never so those weekly shows back at the Portland Radio Authority in the late aughts, I was turning on the video, and sometimes maybe the article was in the corner, and I messed with that a bunch.
We tried it too. We feel
and maybe it didn't. I don't know. It just didn't. It didn't feel like the payoff was there for the work that it took me to kind of do some of the stuff. And I guess I see myself some ways kind of like I've doubled down into I'm radio. As everything's gone video, I've probably gotten more and more that it's like, hey, wait, I'm actually a trained radio guy. I'm gonna maybe make sure I stick to that a little bit. I haven't actually tried this video angle. You're getting this.
I want to see. I want to see you get your passion out for all things cinema, because you've been tied to like the radio aspect. It's like, but I'd like to see your take. What was that film series? What was we did a couple episodes. Remember?
Well, we had Navigating Netflix.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I was talking about. Yeah.
And of course that was more fun to do when Netflix was still somewhat a smaller thing.
Yeah, they used to send us DVDs, and we'd tell you about it.
Man. Well, and I loved if I don't know if LD can dig these up, I loved working on that project. I spent a bunch of time in the photo editor to make the little envelopes like Netflix used to send the DVDs out. Yeah. I made covers like those for some of our episodes, with the design and the font and, parodying that. Obviously, I guess I'm into that.
Navigating Netflix. That's 2008 LD. That would be my old YouTube page, or maybe if Pilato had a page back then, it would still be there.
I've thought about, I don't know if I've asked him before. Corbett has film, literature, and the New World Order.
He took over. He like Navigating Netflix became obsolete because Corbett's like, he's like, I got this, guys.
And that's such a classier name. It's more broad. He could talk about books. It didn't have to be something on Netflix. He hasn't. You might notice now, he hasn't done an episode in that for years. He kind of ended up putting that to bed. I have joked with him before of like, dude, let me take the series title and resurrect it. But in a way, honestly, I think I do it in my own way on the Media Monarchy broadcast. I have my broadcast schedule kind of set where first Friday of the month we'll have this extra segment. So essentially every Friday will be a book or a film or an album. It's just been a way to, again, going back to making the routine, making literally the broadcast clock, and just sort of thinking about the schedule.
Staying true to your roots as well. I don't know. There's something like artistic. I don't know. Romantic.
Oh, look, there it is on screen.
Hey, this one's on Idiocracy. Episode 2. Looks
nice.
like Chet System has it up. Your friend
that's That's Paulie the Verge.
I was just about to say. That guy's he's still all right, isn't he? He's still alive and kicking.
Oh yeah, he was just helping Benny Wills the other day, like make his router or something work so they could get internet at his new house.
Really?
Yeah, and Paul got married. His wife's name's Rhea, and we saw them. They came to Pork Fest 2 years ago, I think.
Okay. When we put up Octopus with one of the guys, Girder is his handle. The very next month, we actually did another radio play that had Benny Wills as one of the actors. So it was Benny Wills, my wife Cassie Cohn, and another actor, and that I don't call their name. They recorded it, and we basically had secured the rights to air it once. But it's a play called Yankee Tavern. It's set in New York. Stephen Dietz is a famous playwright. It's basically takes place in a bar. It's a story of a couple, but also a story of 9/11 questions. And it was a mainstream, a kind of a mainstream look at 9/11 questions at a point when, like I said, a lot of that stuff became popular. Climbed to the top of the conspiracy stuff with Clyde, doing the nationally syndicated show. Crazy stuff with Boston Marathon, with Sandy Hook. Got to meet and greet with lots of cool people on the phone, and we would work with the Comic-Con, the Wizard World Comic-Con that came to town.
It's cool.
But I probably got kind of burnt out with it. Maybe in some ways because it wasn't mine. It was, it's still somebody else's stuff. I went across the hall to the rock and roll station and did a year of morning radio. This is about as normie as I could possibly probably get, while still being Media Monarchy. And I was amazed that they hadn't just punched my name into a search engine once and been like, oh, he does a bunch of weird shit on the internet.
Yeah.
But I'm then suddenly on this morning show on a big name station in Portland. Literally the first day I went on the mic on the rock station. I forget how it came, if it was Twitter, probably Twitter. Someone who was a Media Monarchy listener who was in Portland, they're like, I just heard you on Kink. They're like, I know that was you. I just heard you on 101. I was like, damn. Immediately. And now, that was the only time that happened like that. But it was funny to me that it happened literally the first day I went on air. Did this rock station. It was even more fun than the conspiracy show because it was all comedians and bands and not really heavy topics.
Yeah.
Because it's morning radio. You don't want a bunch of heavy topics.
Yeah.
Comedians come through town.
It's got to be funny in the morning. Get you to work so you don't go postal.
For the nightclub. So I got to meet, Dave Foley and Tommy Davidson and all kinds of comedians coming through town. It gets to 2015, and I basically become the co-host of the show with the venerable lady who'd been the morning host for a long, long time. They lay a contract on me.
Ooh.
How'd that feel?
That's basically what kind of killed the party for me. I'd been going along to get along because producers and board ops don't get contracts. They don't, whatever. It's the on-air talent that they invest money in and marketing and names and branding and blah, blah, blah. So if they're going to, and that's what they said to me. They're like, well, if we're going to start to spend money on you, if this is going to become Sheila and James in the morning, we got to make it legal.
Yeah.
And it was terrible pay. I was doing 3 jobs for the price of one. I was the producer and board op, which was the thing they kind of initially hired me for. Now I'm on air talent running the book, so they were getting a screaming deal, but I was excited to do it. And that's the way, of course, industry is really good at getting passionate people to work their asses off for him because they love to do it. Of course, the film industry does the same thing. You're like, oh my God, like I know I haven't eaten and slept in 3 days, but I can't believe I finally get to do all this stuff. But I can't eat promo CDs. They, of course, like any contract, they would have owned anything I came up with, any characters, any bits, any skits, any of that crap. They would have owned all that. It was just coming. I mean, I can now know, of course, that Trump was probably close to announcing, like he was getting more and more in the media in 2015. My co-host, of course, she's the famous liberal of the station. You heard of Lars Larson?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was at that station. So he was his station of origin is in Portland, and he gets, syndicated out national. They did a thing only for, the Portland audience that was Sheila versus Lars. They would have some taped, debate about whatever the topic was of the day.
He said, she said with Kevin Bacon.
It's exactly that. So the Trump thing's starting to come up a little bit. They lay this contract on me. I'm still Media Monarchy. And I, of course, with talking it over, I quit. I was like, I don't want to sign this contract. I started to get just sketched out about, because, I was fine to be able to hang out with bands and comedians. But then when it gets to like, oh, but if we're going to put your faces on the hot air balloon when you're doing the remote at the dumbass car lot.
Yeah.
I was just like,
yeah.
Nope.
You didn't want to do that anyway. So that's good they gave you that to incentivize.
Gave you an easy out,
elsewhere.
actually. Yeah.
So that was my, I'm going to try and go full time with Media Monarchy. I made made a couple kind of, promotional clips essentially saying, hey, you know me, I've worked in radio. I have a radio background. Media Monarchy's always been my side thing. I want to give it a go and try and make it my full-time thing. And this is only, this is 2015. Seems somewhat recent in some ways. That was when I basically started to go on air every day. Even just if it was for an hour at a time, I was going on air via Mixlr. Mixlr. It was a stream and a chat. Very nice and simple. You could use it for free for an hour. After an hour, it would kick you off. You could immediately press the button again and start back up, but it had bumped off all your listeners.
Yeah. Very useful.
So I used that and just started to get into the routine of, I'm going to start broadcasting from home every day. This is still in Portland. Start to do it from home, start to do it more. This is, of course, when Patreon and all these other kind of platforms are out there. And ever since then, it's just kind of grown and grown. But again, it was all kind of relatively normal 2015 to 2020. I'm still doing the exact same thing, but it just, everything went bonkers. Obviously, the pandemic era has been another 9/11 style event that affected everything and everybody's brain. And there's before and after. There's no other way, no other way around it, unfortunately.
Yeah, the Agenda 21 plan was behind, so they had to ratchet it up a little quicker.
So so as things have gotten crazier, and just like you were saying, we used to have to work really hard and spread this information and maybe, I don't know, be more measured and try and, here's all the facts, here's all the stuff. Now it seems like pretty much everything's out. If you've got two brain cells to rub together, something's weird.
Yeah, it can't be more conspicuous than any other time, because 10 years ago, we used to debate about this privately. We're like, everyone else is living their lives, having children, having family, doing whatever they're going to do, right? And we're trying to convince these people that they're actually in a war. They're in like kind of a war. They don't realize it's a war for your mind. It's a war for your soul. And it's like, they don't feel that. They don't see it. And I would sympathize with them, because I get what you see, Rich, but at the same time, I get why they don't see it as well. But now, I mean, I've been able to have conversations with like my parents and friends I would never be able to have 10 years ago ever, just because of what the government has done. They've made it as blatant,
Plain as
it's like a
day.
revelation, as the revelation of the craft, so to speak, at this point.
And it's made it, and thankfully, it's made it easier for me to be more of a radio guy in some ways. I still do the morning show. I still go over all the hardcore news that I've been doing the last 16 years. They're just, I don't know, there becomes and this is probably with anything you do a bunch, to finally be able to kind of get into like the ease of doing it.
Mm. Yep.
And that to reach a point where, and definitely it's gotten kind of aggro. I've not loved living in New Mexico. I've certainly not loved seeing all my family and friends lose their mind for Trump, let alone for COVID.
Yeah.
So definitely, I know the tenor of my shows has gotten pretty aggro at times the last couple years. So I've been playing
Salty. The Alex Jones salt. It comes after you do it for so long.
Because I've been now doing the morning show for enough years. For the last couple months. I don't know why I haven't been doing it longer. I've been playing shows from that day in history later on in the day.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, I just did the April 21st show for 2022, but in a couple hours, let's listen to the 2016 and the 2017.
Yeah.
I'm much more chill. It's a lot slower. People are like, "Whoa, that's holy shit! That's chill monarchy." It's like, and that's only 2016.
Yeah. You should hear him in 2005. Very chill.
Very chill, very measured, trying to get this information to as many people as possible because they weren't interested. Now, lots more people are interested. It has made it, it's made it easier. It's weird because, of course, it doesn't take long before people are like, "Oh, now you're selling fucking shirts."
Who says that? Someone who doesn't wear shirts?
I guess.
I mean, I don't understand how these people have internet access. They think everything's for free.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
But I think just doing any sort of self-promotion is like, now you've sold out in some capacity. It's like, even your favorite bands, like
they sell t-shirts,
underground,
they?
like they got to sell t-shirts and albums too in order to even pay for gas to go to the next venue. We've all heard those stories. It's like, come on,
this guy's selling DVDs. Oh.
It's insane. Some of the people out there, dude. It's
not your key demographic. That's what you need to understand.
Exactly.
But man, I have to say again, 9/11 synchronicity was a giant influence and inspiration and information right at that point where, I'd started the website, but I maybe didn't know what I exactly wanted to do. And it's not that I necessarily was like, "Oh, I'm going to do that." It was more of just, it maybe gave me the power, gave me the inspiration, instead of just hiding it in samples that I buried in techno music.
Yeah.
Right.
To make it, I'm James Evan Pilato, and I'm going to talk about some really interesting information that I think we should talk about more.
Yeah, I think just having a couple other people like you and Corbett who were doing something similar from a different angle, gave me inspiration to keep going forward and keep trying to understand. And I was trying to figure out what is bumper music and how do I present something audibly, like all that radio theater that you had background in. I didn't know anything about that stuff, so I was trying to learn on the fly. So, and then a couple years ago you were using Discord. I was like, oh, I could try to use Discord too. What could I do with Discord? So yeah, thank you for that too, man. You've always been like a trailblazer. I think it's because you got that thin, wiry kind of cross-country runner frame. Maybe that's why you're the trailblazer. And I'm always, I'm bringing up the rear. I'm here. And you're right. We squeezed those drops of media out. It was so hard. It was like squeezing out drops of blood. And now it's like there's a fire hose of this information just going out there every day. So it's like, good. We can take a breather here. Someone else is saying the importance to the people who need it.
when your mother-in-law has to, be told, it's like, I was podcasting before Joe Rogan and Mark Maron.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
We're in
like,
a small club. We
that's
should have a club. We should be in that club. Me, you, and Corbett. We're in that club. Long form content, podcasting before those guys. We made it cool.
That's the thing, man. So I think the consistency of the work from real people that obviously weren't being funded in some nefarious way or pushing some weird agendas, because what I can smell a lie like a fart in a car, I believe Christian Slater says in Bump Up the Volume.
Yeah,
I can tell when media isn't truthful, and a bunch of that again comes from being a little kid, being kept away from it, and then wanting to kind of study it. So it's been crazy. It's been a blessing, and I really appreciate all the way that the things have worked out.
I'm glad we're not both actors like Dallas Goldbug said that one time. Who did he say you were? He said I was Jim Belushi's kid who was in Final Fantasy or something.
Oh man, that's old. Yeah,
I don't even know who that guy was. So
that.
So for those of you playing at home, one day Pilato and me and Corbett and whoever else, we wake up and then somebody's accusing you on the internet of being somebody else because they like measured your ears or something. And so the accusation leveled at me by this character who's a former criminal. He leveled this thing. He said, Richard is the son of James Belushi and his mom is acting as his wife. It was convoluted. And first off, I looked this guy up because I had no idea. I'd never seen Final Destination. That was the movie I think he was in. And I was like, well, first off, he's like, the guy I'm supposed to be is way shorter than me. So how do I fake tallness? And he's on Good Morning America this morning and I'm right here or whatever the situation. Like, this person, Dallas Goldbug, might not be playing with a full deck. Who did he accuse you of? Because I think it was in the same video. Do you remember?
Mine weren't famous.
I thought you were a Palestinian terrorist,
and years later, I've gotten a few other "you're this guy, you're that guy." I was a Taliban terrorist.
There you go.
In Afghanistan.
No, wait, you got to say that for the transcript or wherever this goes in the future. You were accused of.
I was sorry. Yeah.
They just renditioned Pilato yesterday. I can't know why.
Yeah, they'll call me out right now.
Yeah, right.
I was accused of being, in addition to being James Evan Pilato of Media Monarchy,
yes,
I was accused of being a Taliban guy in Afghanistan and some Occupy dude up in Zuccotti in New York. It's like, okay, not even.
How do you do both at the same time in the same respects?
That's what passed for trolling back then. It's
Yeah,
like 2010, 2012. That's what passed for trolling back then. Somebody making ludicrous accusations that nobody could even take seriously.
Yep.
Right? Today, trolling's different.
And that's honestly, that's what feels like has been done to the 9/11 truth movement. 20 years later now is what turned into arguing about Q or flat Earth or all these other
right. Yeah, it's just a bunch of nonsense. That's right. It's a bunch of like bad actors and just people who don't know how to ascertain basics of reality.
Robert Anton Wilson Discordians. That's who I believe.
Yeah.
I think LD maybe was flashing one of them up a few years.
I was going to ask who accused you of being the Breaking Bad kid.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Wait, hold on. There it is. Yeah. And the closest thing is like, I do like breakfast foods. That's as close as it gets.
Yeah, he loved this cereal. That's right.
Corbett sends me a link because he was using what I forget exactly what it was, SpeakPipe or one of those things where essentially someone could call up and leave you an audio message.
Yeah.
And someone called up and left this message about I don't know why Corbett doesn't talk about the truth of me being an actor and I'm the Walt Jr. kid.
Oh my God.
Then the most recent one, I was Trevor Moore, R.I.P. That one was the most amusing to me.
It's right up there with Alex Jones's Bill Hicks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like
because I was a fan of Trevor Moore. So by that point, it was like, oh, sweet. Finally, one of these crazy things is actually amusing to me.
I really liked your Founding Fathers rap. So
here, Dylan found the Abu Mansar Al-Mriki
nice.
Pontius Pilato.
Yeah, Pontius Pilato. There you go.
There
People
is.
carried that.
Oh,
People
man.
carried that like it was news, everybody. So we were defamed and other people carried it like news. I feel sorry for their audiences. That's why.
And there's a reason why I teach logic. There's a reason why I teach.
Keep yourself away from the crazy people. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Man, I love you guys. It's so awesome having LD. I mean, hang out in the Media Monarchy community.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to summarize your story. Boy from the East Coast follows girl to the West Coast. Boy gets girl. It's like sequel to Good Will Hunting, basically.
Oh no, I was going to say that you were going to go there. I knew you were going to go there.
How you like them
Well,
apples, Tony?
Gus Van Zant's from Portland.
Oh, there you go. See, bringing it full world, new world order, food world order, bringing it all together, mixing and matching, rolling those shells around. All right, James, thank you for investing so much of your time this evening. Get back to living life. Take a little rest on your respite, but get back out there, get on the horse, keep riding, and we will help proliferate your message just a little bit further.
Thanks so much, you guys. Appreciate you.
Yeah,
Take
It's
care.
an honor. Awesome work over these years.
Thanks,
So,
James.
Yeah, I take my hat off, but
Yeah.
I showered for this, so sorry. Yeah, hats off to you. Oh,
Cheers, you
James,
guys.
also thanks for wearing. I people send me pictures of you wearing Peace Revolution and Tragedy and Hope T-shirts all the time. Thank you. I really
For sure.
appreciate that. Yeah.
That's again, that's funny. It comes back to being where it's like, I've got
rock.
rock shirts and DVDs and albums for sale. And so I couldn't be more stoked for the way things have worked out with all of course, the troubles and things that it's sort of built off of. That's that's a whole other discussion for a whole other time. But
Yeah, dude, you're living a dream. Johnny Depp's
Strange
got nothing on you.
We had to go there.
cheers, you guys. Peace.
Have a great day.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to send him a follow-up because I did want to ask him if he ever saw the Tom Dowd documentary. What's it called? The Language of Music.
Language of Music.
Wow.
It's fantastic.
Put it on your
Language
list.
of
That's my
Music
thank
is
you for you coming.
unbelievable.
You will thrive on that.
You will love
documentary.
that. Yeah, check that out.
Okay.
E-track.
Word.
Word.
Cheers.
Peace to your mother.
Have a great
Word
night.
to your mother. Peace. There you go. I got it. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man.
No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man.